Hello, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss the important issues appearing in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 22nd May 2019. The news to be discussed has been presented on the screen, and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So, let's start our today's discussion. Now, this news appears on page number 9. It says Pakistani fishing vessel caught after hot pursuit. 200 kg of heroin seized. Now, in this news, you must know about this term hot pursuit. And this topic of hot pursuit in your prelims examination comes within current events of international importance, and in your mains, it comes within GS paper 3, specifically under security, that is, challenges to internal security, as well as security challenges and their management in border areas, and also gets covered under GS paper 2 under International Relations, specifically with respect to United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas. Now, this particular news highlights that the Indian Coast Guard apprehended a Pakistani fishing vessel off Gujarat and thereby seized 200 kg of heroin, which was worth rupees 600 crore in the international market. It further says that the Coast Guard team took 6 crew members into custody and retrieved the material, that is, retrieved the heroin. Now, this news highlights that intelligent inputs were received by the Indian Coast Guard by NTRO, that is National Technical Research Organization, Maritime Security Agency, as well as by the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence. Now, after receiving the inputs, the Indian Coast Guard deployed Arinjay, which is a fast patrol vessel, as well as 2 interceptor boats, namely C-437 and C-408, and also an aircraft for this particular hot pursuit. So we understand that this concept of hot pursuit becomes extremely important for us to know from an examination perspective. Now, as you can see, in the year 2016, in your GS paper 3, this particular question with respect to hot pursuit was asked. The question was that the term hot pursuit and surgical strikes are often used in connection with armed action against terrorist attacks. Discuss the strategic impact of such actions. So, the UPSC has already asked this concept of hot pursuit with respect to terrorist attack. So, on this note, it becomes very important for us to know about hot pursuit. So, generally in international law, the doctrine of hot pursuit recognizes the right of any state to pursue a vessel which belongs to another state or which belongs to a foreign state and which has violated international law, and also which has entered into an international territory of another state without their permission. And this concept of hot pursuit has been defined in the United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Seas. Now, Article 111 of United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea of 1982 mentions about right of hot pursuit. It says that the hot pursuit of a foreign ship may be undertaken when the competent authorities of coastal state, which in the case of India was Indian Coast Guard, have good reason to believe that the ship has violated the laws and regulations of that particular state. So this Pakistani ship came within the Indian territory without India's permission, and hence under the international law, the Indian Coast Guard had the right of hot pursuit. It says that such pursuit must be commenced when the foreign ship or one of its boats is within the internal waters, that is, in this case, within the jurisdiction of India, the archipelagic waters, the territorial sea, or the contiguous zone of the pursuing state. So, in this case, this Pakistani ship was in Indian waters as per the international law. It further says that the right of hot pursuit ceases as soon as the ship pursued enters the territorial sea of its own state or of a third state. So in this case, if the Pakistani ship had returned back from India's territory or from Indian waters, then the right of hot pursuit to the Indian Coast Guard would have ceased. So basically, under international law, the right of hot pursuit ceases if the ship or the vessel enters the territorial sea of its own state or if it enters the territorial sea of a third state. So in such cases, the right of hot pursuit of that particular state ceases to operate. The article further highlights that the right of a hot pursuit may be exercised only by warships or military aircraft or other ships or aircraft clearly marked and identifiable as being on government service and authorized to that effect. So you can see, after receiving intelligent inputs from various authorities, the Indian Coast Guard deployed its Arrange, that is fast patrol vessel, as well as two interceptor boats, that is C-437 and C-408, and also an aircraft of the Government of India. Hence, the Indian Coast Guard as well as the Government of India was very much within the international law with respect to right to hot pursuit under United Nations Conventions on the Laws of the Seas. Now, under this right of hot pursuit, we come across certain important terms such as territorial sea, contiguous zone, as well as archipelagic waters. So, on this note, let's understand these basic terms as defined under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Now, apart from the important terms, let us also understand about the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It says that it is an international treaty which was adopted and signed in 1982. The 1982 convention replaced four Geneva Convention of April 1958, and these four conventions were with respect to the territorial sea and contiguous zone, the continental shelf, the high seas, as well as fishing and conservation of living resources on the high seas. These four Geneva Conventions were merged together to form the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas in the year 1982. It says that this 1982 convention has created three new institutions to regulate navigation in international waters as well as with respect to other regulation in the international seas. These bodies are the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, the International Seabed Authority, as well as the Commission on the Limits of Continental Shelf. Now next, let us understand about territorial sea as well as contiguous zone, and both these terms have been defined under Article 3 as well as Article 33 of the UNCLOS Convention. Now as you can see in this picture, territorial sea extends up to 12 nautical miles from the baseline, whereas in contiguous zone another 12 nautical miles is added. So we can say that in contiguous zone it's a total of 24 nautical miles from the baseline, and it is only beyond the exclusive economic zone the high sea starts, that is beyond 200 nautical miles. Now let's also go through the definition as provided under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas. Now with respect to territorial sea, it says that every state has a right to establish the breadth of its territorial sea up to a limit not exceeding 12 nautical miles. As we have seen that territorial sea should be up to 12 nautical miles, and this shall be measured from baselines determined in accordance with this convention. Now with respect to contiguous zone, it says that a contiguous zone may not extend beyond 24 nautical miles, again from the baselines. It further says that in a contiguous zone, the coastal state may exercise control necessary with respect to prevent infringement of its customs, fiscal, immigration or sanitary laws, and also regulations within its territory or territorial sea. So a state has a right to prevent infringements of its laws under the contiguous zone, and also to punish infringement of the above laws and regulations committed within its territory or territorial sea. So, a state also has a right to punish infringement if a foreign vessel enters into the contiguous zone of that particular state. Now, another important terms are exclusive economic zone as well as high seas. Now, with respect to exclusive economic zone, it says that exclusive economic zone is an area beyond and adjacent to the territorial sea and shall not extend beyond 200 nautical miles. So, an EEZ is an area beyond and adjacent to the territorial sea. So, an exclusive economic zone starts after the territorial sea, and this shall not extend beyond 200 nautical miles from the baselines from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured. Now, sovereign state has a right with respect to underwater exploring, exploiting, conserving, as well as managing the natural resources, both living as well as non-living organisms. Further, a state with respect to exclusive economic zone shall also have right with respect to economic exploitation and can carry out certain activities with respect to economic exploitation. Further, such state under EEZ also have rights with respect to production of energy from water, currents as well as winds. Another right which a state has under EEZ is with respect to establishment and use of artificial islands, installations and structures. So basically a state can establish artificial island as well as install artificial structure within the EEZ. Further, a state also has right with respect to marine scientific research as well as protection and preservation of the marine environment. So these are some of the rights which a state has in the exclusive economic zone. Now another important term mentioned is with respect to high seas. Now the article mentions that all parts of a sea which is not included in exclusive economic zone, in the territorial sea or in the internal waters of a state or in the archipelagic waters of an archipelagic state. So anything which is not included in either of these can be said to be a part of high seas, and generally an area beyond 200 nautical miles from the baseline is considered as high seas. Now another important term highlighted in a definition of high seas is that of archipelagic waters or archipelagic state. So let us understand about these two terms as well. Now first of all, let us understand the term archipelago. Now archipelago means a group of islands including parts of islands or interconnecting waters as well as other natural features which are so closely interrelated that such islands, waters and other natural features form an intrinsic geographical, economic and political entity. As you can see in this map, Philippines is an example of archipelago state. So archipelagic state in this context means a state constituted wholly by one or more archipelagos and may include other islands. Examples can be Fiji, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, the Bahamas as well as the Philippines. Now in this discussion, we had also mentioned about an organization, namely the National Technical Research Organization. So the National Technical Research Organization is a technical intelligence agency and works or functions under the National Security Advisor in the Prime Minister's office. So both these terms becomes important from your prelims examination about NTRO. Further, NTRO has been also designated as a nodal agency and takes all measures with respect to protection of national critical infrastructure as well as it also handles cyber security incidents. So on this note, NTRO again becomes an important organization with respect to your upcoming prelims examination. So in this news discussion, we have discussed various important topics with respect to international maritime laws. Please remember these different terms as they can be asked in your prelims examination. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 15. The news says profit booking drags Sensex from record highs. The news also highlights about a VIX index and says that a measure of near-term volatility rises more than 8% on Tuesday. So recently, the stock market indices of Sensex as well as Nifty registered a largest increase since 2013, and this increase in the stock market can be attributed to the publishing of exit poll which predicted a return of the NDA government with full majority. Here you must understand that after the publishing of exit poll which predicted a return of the NDA government having full majority led to a positive investor sentiments which further led to higher demands of shares, and this effectively increased the price of shares in the stock market. Now subsequently it was expected that the stock market would continue to rise further. However, there was a drop in the stock market because of profit booking. So here let us understand about this concept of profit booking. Now this topic of profit booking in your prelims examination becomes a part of Indian economy and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 3, specifically under Indian economy and issues relating to it. Now profit booking as a term refers to sale of shares in order to realize the appreciation in their value. Now let us understand the concept of profit booking through an example. Suppose the share of a company ABC Private Limited is valued at rupees 100 per share Now a person buys this share worth rupees 100 per share. Now, after some time, say the demand of the share of the company rises and the price of the share increases to rupees 150. So you can see the person made a profit of rupees 50. So in order to realize this particular profit of rupees 50, the person will sell his share. So this selling of share on making certain profit is referred as profit booking. However, if all the individuals who have purchased the share of ABC Company Private Limited decides to sell the share, then the value of the share will come down and subsequently the price of the share will reduce. So we can say that profit booking by multiple investors at the same time may lead to a decline in the price of the shares or the value of the shares. So in case of India, there was a certain appreciation in the prices of shares due to exit polls which led to an increase in stock market indices. However, subsequently, the investors resorted to profit booking in order to realize their profit, and hence there was a drop in the stock market indices. And this volatility in the stock market indices is evident in the fact that there has been an increase in the VIX index value. Now, VIX refers to the volatility index and is published by National Stock Exchange. Volatility index measures the degree of volatility or fluctuations in the Nifty for the next 30 days. Now, a higher value of VIX implies higher volatility expectations in the market, whereas lower value of VIX refers to or implies a lower volatility expectations in the market. Now, VIX has a strong negative correlation with Nifty because if VIX index falls, then it refers to a rise in Nifty, and when VIX index rises, it means there is a fall in Nifty indices. Now, this can be understood from the fact that investors do not want to invest in a volatile market and wait for the market to stabilize. So, investors want to invest in a stable market. So, when VIX index falls, it means the market is more stable and hence there is more investment by the investors, which ends up in rising of Nifty indices. Whereas when VIX indices rises, it means that the market has become more volatile and thereby the investors do not invest in such market and hence the Nifty falls. So we can say there is an inverse relation between VIX index as well as the Nifty parameter or the Nifty indices. So these are some of the important terms with respect to volatility index as well as profit booking. So in this news, these two terms with respect to profit booking and volatility index becomes important from your prelims perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 11. It says the IBSA task list. Why this unique grouping of India, Brazil and South Africa must be revitalized. Now this article discusses in length about the importance of this particular forum known as IBSA, that is India, Brazil and South Africa, which was a precursory to the forming of BRICS. Now this particular article starts with highlighting the rise, the fall and then again the rise of the IBSA platform. This topic of IBSA in your prelims examination forms a part of current events of national and international importance, and your mains gets covered under GS paper 2, specifically under global groupings and agreements involving India or affecting India's interest. Now as you can see, the India Brazil South Africa Dialogue Forum was established in June 2003. It says that IBSA is a coordinating mechanism amongst three emerging countries, three multi-ethnic and multicultural democracies. IBSA as a forum is a consultation as well as coordination group on various global and regional political issues. Further, IBSA collaborates on international projects and also coordinate among developing countries to achieve sustainable development goals. So IBSA is basically bound together by a shared conviction in universal values of democracy, plurality, diversity, human rights, rule of law, commitment to SDG goals, inclusivity of all communities and gender, as well as respect for international law. After the establishment of IBSA in 2003 as a dialogue forum, its first summit took place in Brazil in the year 2006, which was followed by the second summit in the year 2007 in South Africa, followed by India in 2008, fourth summit took place in 2010, and the fifth summit took place in 2011 in South Africa. The first summit and the fifth summit gave IBSA a global profile. However, BRICS was constituted, and BRICS also included two important countries, namely China as well as Russia. So the inclusion of China as well as Russia as BRICS overshadowed IBSA. And for some years, the IBSA Dialogue Forum almost remained dormant. However, the 15th anniversary held during 2018-19 has imparted new momentum to revitalize this IBSA Dialogue Forum. And this was again reiterated through the IBSA Declaration issued in Pretoria in June 2018. So this article highlights the importance of IBSA within the BRICS Forum. As you can read, the practice question says that strengthening IBSA can increase the effectiveness of BRICS and will also help in following a more balanced approach on key issues of interest to India, Brazil and South Africa discussed. So this particular practice question have been framed keeping in mind the importance of IBSA within the BRICS community. So it is in this context the author highlights the importance of IBSA, its features, the problems that hamper IBSA, as well as the growth and future steps that can be undertaken to revitalize the IBSA Dialogue Forum. Now we have already seen about the background to IBSA, where the India-Brazil-South Africa Forum was established in 2003 by the Brasilia Declaration and intends for a South-South cooperation. Now the official and experts believe that the three countries of IBSA are the true inheritor of solidarity, as well as they are the true champion of South-South cooperation. Now South-South cooperation here refers to cooperation among developing nations of the world. And this cooperation takes place through IBSA Fund. It says that the IBSA Facility Fund for Alleviation of Poverty and Hunger was created in 2004 and became operational in the year 2006. This particular fund aims to support projects in developing countries, in particular least developed countries, and also in post-conflict reconstruction and development countries. So through IBSA Fund, it helps those countries which require funds for its development. It says that the IBSA Fund is managed by the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation. It further highlights that the IBSA Fund is managed by the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, and the UNOSSC lends its professional expertise to various stakeholders with respect to promotion as well as development of this global south or the South-South cooperation. So it was on this note that India, Brazil and South Africa signed a declaration on South-South cooperation in June 2018, and IBSA has also differentiated South-South cooperation from official development aid. So this again becomes important to understand that IBSA as a forum has differentiated between South-South cooperation and official development aid. Now the Brasilia Declaration of 2010 highlights that the South-South cooperation is not aid. It further highlights that developing countries engaged in South-South cooperations are not donors or recipients, but are developing partners and have been incorporated in IBSA funded projects. So basically, those involved in South-South cooperation are neither donors nor recipients. It then talks about the official development assistance, which is a term coined by Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that is the OECD. So the official development assistance is a term coined by OECD, and it measures aid in the form of soft loan for economic development of the recipient countries. So ODA can be said to be a aid in the form of soft loan. So this is the basic difference between ODA as well as South-South cooperation. And under South-South cooperation, any funds given by countries is not considered as aid and the countries are neither considered as donors or recipient. So the difference between official development aid and South-South cooperation is that ODA is obligatory in nature for developed countries, whereas South-South cooperation is voluntary in nature. Another important aspect is that ODA is a supply-driven process, whereas South-South cooperation is a demand-driven process. Now, ODA is supply driven because it depends on the country which wants to give certain loans. Since ODA is in the form of loan, hence it depends upon the donor country. Whereas SSC or South-South cooperation is demand driven process whereby the partner countries determine the priorities in IBSA projects. It further highlights that ODA creates new dependencies between donor and recipient country, whereas in South-South cooperation, it rests primarily on creating an interdependence with recipient country. So under South-South cooperation, new dependency is not created since fund under South-South cooperation is not in the form of loan. Another important aspect is that ODA mainly implement projects with economic and political conditionalities. So there are conditions involved while providing certain funds, and most of these conditions are either political or economic in nature. Whereas countries under South-South cooperation receive these funds on non-conditionality. That is, there is no conditionality created in order to transfer fund under the South-South cooperation. Further, let us also understand about IBSA Sherpas. Now, since we know that the 15th anniversary of IBSA held during 2018-19 have imparted new momentum to revitalize IBSA as a dialogue forum. So on this note, let us also know about IBSA Sherpas. It says that the first India, Brazil and South Africa Sherpas or South Sherpas meeting was held in Chennai in India in April 2018, and this was done to commemorate IBSA's 15th anniversary in 2018-19. Now, what is a Sherpa? A Sherpa is a personal representative of a head of a state or government who prepares and coordinates in international summit or meeting. So, Sherpa is a personal representative of a head of a state or any government. It further highlights that the Sherpas of IBSA Dialogue Forum are provided the mandate to implement the decisions taken in IBSA head of state meetings and IBSA ministerial meetings. So again, the role of Sherpas in a IBSA meeting becomes very important. This article also highlights about future growth with respect to the development and growth of IBSA as a dialogue forum. It mentions that the Government of India has started the IBSA Fellowship Program at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, and the article highlights that such initiative must also be taken by the other countries, that is Brazil and South Africa. The author further says that since the inception of BRICS, it has overshadowed IBSA as a geopolitical forum because of inclusion of China as well as Russia. It says that IBSA has been overshadowed by BRICS, whereby geopolitical and geoeconomic weight of China has provided BRICS with greater outreach and potential. However, the author says that IBSA has the potential to form a powerful alternative to both Western style neoliberal policies and Chinese style authoritarian development. So basically, IBSA provide an alternative both against Chinese model of development as well as against the Western model of development, as IBSA is focused more on humanitarian approach. Further, the author also highlights the significance of a growing trade among the IBSA countries. It says that the economies of Brazil and South Africa have seen a slowdown in recent past, and the trade among the three countries is quite small and is less than 3% of global trade. So on this note, it is necessary for these countries to find a complementary trade basket or an alternative way where they can find a mechanism to trade more with each other. So these three countries must trade more with each other. Further, the author highlights that the three countries should also undertake formation of certain forums to improve the political profile of IBSA. by forming forums for parliamentarians, academic community, business community, etc. So, by forming a forum for different kinds of stakeholders in the society, such as parliamentarians, academic community, and business community, IBSA can improve its political profile. So, these can be said to be some of the highlights with respect to future growth of IBSA. Thus, we understand that the role of IBSA will again gain significance in times to come. Thus, this article, with respect to international relation among three countries, that is India, Brazil, and South Africa, becomes extremely important for us to understand from a examination point of view. The next news appears on page number 15. It says the United Nations lowers India's FY20 GDP growth forecast, says it will be 7.1% instead of 7.5%, and also mentioned that the Indian economy expanded by 7.2%. So effectively, the report said that the Indian economy will grow at a slower pace due to overall slowdown in the global economy. Now, this topic with respect to world economic situation and prospects as of mid 2019 report forms a part of economy in your prelims examination, and your mains gets covered under GS paper 3 under issues relating to Indian economy. Now, this particular report is a joint product of United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, as well as the 5 United Nations regional commissions, that is the Economic Commission for Africa, the Economic Commission for Europe, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, and Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. So, this report effectively says that there has been a slowdown in global growth. Now, the report says that there has been a slowdown in global growth mainly because of unresolved trade tensions as well as because of elevated international policy uncertainty in the international market. The report also highlights that across developed as well as developing countries, growth projections for the year 2019 have been downgraded. The slowdown in global growth can be witnessed from the fact that it has been projected at moderate 2.7% in 2019 and at 2.9% in 2020, whereas it was 3% in the year 2018. Now, this report also highlights some of the escalating tensions amongst world economies. The report says that the risks include further escalation in trade disputes, a sudden deterioration in financial conditions, and the accelerating effects of climate change. So, these are the three aspects highlighted in this report with respect to further escalation in trade dispute, sudden deterioration in financial conditions, as well as accelerating effects of climate change. The report also highlights the fact that to place the world economy on a 2030 agenda for sustainable development requires more comprehensive and well targeted policy responses, including a combination of monetary, fiscal, and development oriented measures. So, the report says that to tackle these slowdown in global growth and also to put the world economy on a robust path in support of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, the world economy needs a more targeted policy response with respect to combination of monetary and fiscal policy as well as development oriented measures. So, this particular report highlights that there has been a slowdown in global economy, and the report also mentions about India and says that Indian economy will grow at a slower pace at that of 7.1% in financial year 2019-20. So, in this news analysis, you must remember about this World Economic Situation and Prospects report, as well as the fact that the report is a joint product of United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, and 5 United Nations regional commissions. Thus, with this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news also appears on page number 15. It says RBI to create regulatory cadre. This news highlights that the Reserve Bank of India has decided to create a specialized supervisory as well as regulatory cadre. The creation of this cadre is with a view to strengthen the supervision as well as regulation of banks, urban cooperative banks as well as non-banking financial companies. Now, this topic of regulatory cadre for RBI again forms a part of economy in your prelims examination, and your mains gets covered under GS paper 3 under Indian economy and various issues pertaining to Indian economy. Now, there have complaints that the Reserve Bank of India was lax in the supervisory functions, especially in timely detection of frauds and with respect to poor governance in the banking sector. The Standing Committee on Finance had last year questioned the Reserve Bank for failing to take corrective measures on rising bad loans prior to the asset quality review undertaken in December 2015. Now, need for dedicated cadre within RBI is also felt because of an increasing complexities in order to regulate financial institutions such as banks and NBFCs. Further, recent cases of large frauds at banks and defaults by NBFCs requires specialized supervision to ensure that the financial sector remains in good health. Now, recently, large bank frauds with respect to Nirav Modi, Vijay Mallya, and default of ILNFS seeks specialized supervisory and regulatory cadre within the Reserve Bank of India. So, considering all these aspects, we can say that there is definitely a need for a dedicated cadre with respect to specialized supervisory and regulatory cadre within the Reserve Bank in order to strengthen the supervision and regulation of banks in India. Now, presently, the Reserve Bank of India has a board for financial supervision which has been entrusted with the responsibility of supervision of banks as well as NBFCs. The BFS is headed by the RBI governor and has 4 directors from central board as members of board for financial supervision. Now, this news is in transition, so let's wait for the RBI to create a regulatory cadre. And in this, you must remember about Board for Financial Supervision, which is headed by the RBI governor. Now, after our discussion, these forms your practice question for the day. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. The question says, consider the following statements. First, the right of hot pursuit is not allowed under the international laws. No, the statement is incorrect as it is allowed under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Second, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea replaced 4 Vienna Convention of 1958. No, the statement again is incorrect as it replaced 4 Geneva Convention of 1958. So in this, the correct answer is D, that is neither 1 nor 2. The second question says, which of the following rights are allowed under exclusive economic zone to a coastal state? The options are scientific exploration, exploiting natural resources, economic activities, and establishing artificial islands. So all these activities are allowed under exclusive economic zone to a coastal state. So in this, the correct answer is D, that is 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now these are your practice question number 3 and practice question number 4. What you can do again is to take a pause of 5 seconds. The question says, consider the following statements. First, excessive profit booking may lead to further rise in price of shares. No, the statement is incorrect as we have seen that excessive profit booking may actually lead to decrease in price of shares. Hence, the first statement becomes incorrect. Second, volatility index is published by National Stock Exchange. Yes, this statement is correct. So in this, B becomes the correct answer. Question number 4 says, World Economic Situation and Prospects Report is prepared by. Options are IMF, Amnesty International, United Nations, Red Cross. In this, the correct answer is C, that is United Nations. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.